The butcher's nails were not conceived in the sanctity of a laboratory, but in the blood-soaked sands of a gladiatorial arena. Nuceria was a world of pain, a realm where cruelty was currency and suffering was a spectacle. It was here, in the heart of a screaming crowd, that Angron was transformed from a slave to a weapon, from a warrior to a monster. The butcher's nails were hammered into his skull, one by one, each spike a needle of agony, each drill a promise of endless fury. The butcher's nails were the most evil device ever created by man. They were not a tool of war, they were a weapon of control, a means of erasing the self and replacing it with a single, all-consuming desire: to kill. Angron's legion was not born in the fires of madness, it was forged in them. The World Eaters were once noble, disciplined warriors, adherents to the codes of martial honor and brotherhood. But when Angron came to them, he brought more than his fury, he brought the butcher's nails. At first, the nails were an anomaly, an aberration confined to Angron alone. The World Eaters watched as their Primarch tore through enemy lines like a berserk animal, his eyes wild, his face a mask of unending pain. They feared him, revered him, but they did not understand him. To them, Angron was a god of war, a demigod wrapped in flesh and blood, a titan of rage and ruin. But they did not feel his suffering. They did not hear the endless screaming in his skull. Angron could not accept this. He saw his legion as weak, soft, unworthy. They could never understand his pain, never comprehend the torment he endured every waking moment. And so, in a single, brutal decision, he decreed that they would share his suffering. The butcher's nails would not remain his alone. They would become the legion's. The first wave of implants was a bloodbath. Warriors were strapped down, their limbs thrashing as the drills bit into their skulls. Screams echoed through the darkened halls, mingling with the whine of machinery and the stench of burning flesh. Some died instantly, their minds unable to endure the nails' electric fury. Others emerged changed, eyes vacant, faces blank, their minds shattered into shards of violence and hate. For those who survived, the world became a storm of red. Pain was the only reality, a ceaseless tide that surged through every nerve, every thought, every memory. The nails sang their song of rage, driving each warrior to the brink of madness and then pushing them over. In battle, they became engines of destruction, heedless of pain, blind to wounds, driven only by the nails' insatiable hunger for blood. Khan the Betrayer was among the first to be implanted. Once a voice of reason, a warrior of exceptional skill and discipline, Khan became something else, a creature of pure, unrelenting rage. The nails devoured his compassion, his mercy, his soul, leaving behind a berserker who lived only to kill, to maim, to slaughter without end. The World Eaters were no longer a legion, they were a horde, a tide of blood-soaked killers, each one screaming in agony, each one consumed by the nails' electric fury. Battlefields became slaughterhouses, their bodies piled high with the corpses of friend and foe alike. The nails did not distinguish between enemies and allies. They only craved death, only hungered for blood. And Angron watched, his face a twisted mask of satisfaction and despair. He had made them like him. He had made them feel his pain. But in doing so, he had destroyed them. The World Eaters were no longer his sons. They were monsters, thrashing beasts in a sea of blood, slaves to the nails and the rage that consumed them. The butcher's nails had done their work, the legion was gone. And in its place, there was only the bloodbound, a horde of madmen driven to the brink of oblivion by the endless screaming in their skulls. The Emperor of Mankind was the greatest strategist the galaxy had ever seen, a godlike figure who united worlds, conquered civilizations, and brought order to a galaxy mired in chaos. But in his dealings with Angron, he made a decision that would echo through eternity, a decision that would doom an entire legion to a fate worse than death. When the Emperor arrived on Nuceria, he found Angron standing atop a mountain of corpses, a child of suffering transformed into a demigod of fury. The butcher's nails had already carved their way into his skull, burrowing deep, inflicting unrelenting pain. Angron had led a slave rebellion against his masters, a last, desperate stand for freedom. But the Emperor did not see the suffering. He did not hear the screams. He saw only a weapon he intended to wield. Without a word, the Emperor took Angron from Nuceria, leaving his brothers and sisters to die at the hands of their oppressors. Angron's heart shattered. The butcher's nails pulsed in his skull, feeding on his anguish, stoking the fires of his rage. In that moment, Angron's loyalty to the Emperor was burned away, replaced by a hatred so intense it threatened to consume him whole. But the Emperor did not care. He had his Primarch, his warlord, his weapon, and that was all that mattered. When Angron demanded that his legion undergo the same procedure he had endured, the Emperor ordered him to cease. But Angron defied him, commanding the implantation of the butcher's nails throughout the World Eaters. The Emperor could have stopped it. He could have intervened, could have stripped Angron of command, could have removed the nails and restored his son's mind. But he did nothing. Some say the Emperor feared that removing the nails would kill Angron, that the device was too deeply embedded, too intertwined with his neural pathways. Others claim that the Emperor believed the nails would make the World Eaters more effective in battle, more ruthless, more bloodthirsty, a legion of berserkers who would crush his enemies without hesitation. Perhaps the truth was simpler. Perhaps the Emperor simply did not care. To the Emperor, Angron was a weapon, a tool, a means to an end. The Emperor needed his legions to conquer the galaxy, and Angron was a monster perfectly suited to that purpose. Why remove the nails? Why show mercy to a weapon? Why waste time saving a son he had already broken? In the end, the Emperor's silence was deafening. The World Eaters screamed as the drills bit into their skulls, as the nails burrowed into their minds, as their souls were burned away by the endless tide of fury. And the Emperor watched, his eyes cold, his heart empty, his mind already moving on to the next battle, the next war, the next conquest. For the World Eaters, the butcher's nails were not just a device, they were a curse. A curse inflicted not just by Angron, but by the Emperor himself. And in the dark, screaming depths of their minds, the Legionnaires felt the sting of that betrayal, the echo of that silence, the unrelenting, all-consuming agony of a father's apathy. The Dark Mechanicum was a cancer, a blight that festered in the shadows of the Great Crusade. Where the Emperor's Mechanicum sought knowledge and enlightenment, the Dark Mechanicum hungered for power and domination. And when they discovered the butcher's nails, they saw not a device of horror, but a blueprint for perfection. The nails were a crude, barbaric invention, designed to break a man's mind and fill the void with rage. On Nuceria, they were the tools of slavers and tyrants, instruments of absolute control. But the Dark Mechanicum took that crude device and refined it, transforming the nails from primitive agony into an art form of engineered suffering. The process began with the flesh. The scalp was peeled back, revealing the naked skull, glistening under surgical lights. Electrodes, wires, and metal prongs were hammered into bone and brain, each one fusing with nerve clusters, each one programmed to emit pulses of electric fury. The Dark Mechanicum priests chanted their dark hymns as the drills bored deeper, carving pathways through grey matter, severing connections, rewiring synapses. For the World Eaters, the pain was unimaginable. Every nerve ending became a conduit for suffering, every thought drowned beneath a tidal wave of white-hot rage. The nails sang their electric dirge, a song of unending agony that devoured everything but the desire to kill. The Dark Mechanicum watched with glassy, inhuman eyes, their mechanical limbs twitching as they recorded every scream, every twitch, every pulse of torment. But the Dark Mechanicum was not satisfied. The nails were only a beginning, a prototype, a test. If they could refine the nails, if they could perfect them, they could do more than create berserkers. They could create gods. In the dark recesses of their manufactorums, the Dark Mechanicum experimented on their own acolytes, driving the nails deeper, fusing them with demon-forged circuitry, lacing them with the essence of the warp. The results were abominations, flesh melted into metal, minds shattered into 1,000 screaming fragments. The nails became conduits for demonic possession, a gateway through which the dark gods could whisper, scream, and howl. The most horrific of these creations were the soul grinder circuits, a twisted amalgamation of flesh and metal, a network of pain that pulsed through the nervous system like a living infection. The circuits turned the body into a machine of suffering, each nerve ending a receptor for demonic whispers, each heartbeat a hammer strike against sanity. Those implanted with the circuits became conduits for the dark gods, their minds consumed, their souls devoured, their bodies transformed into living altars of agony. And in the depths of these dark manufactorums, the dark mechanicum priests whispered of new creations, new devices, new torments. The butcher's nails were a prototype, a testing ground. But what lay ahead was far worse. The galaxy would burn, and the dark mechanicum would be the ones to set it alight. For the World Eaters, the dark mechanicum's experiments were a nightmare they could not escape. The nails were buried too deep, fused too tightly, entwined with their very souls. There was no removing them now. There was no going back. The World Eaters were trapped in a prison of engineered agony, their minds screaming in unison, their bodies thrashing in the dark. And the dark mechanicum watched and recorded and smiled. The butcher's nails were a masterpiece of cruelty, a device designed to break the mind, enslave the soul, and transform flesh into a weapon of unrelenting fury. But they were not unique. In the grim, unending darkness of the 41st millennium, there existed other devices, each more horrifying than the last, each a monument to the perverse genius of those who sought to control, corrupt, and consume. The Dark Eldar, masters of suffering, had long perfected the art of inflicting pain as a form of sustenance. Their soul cages were more than prisons. They were conduits of torment, sarcophagi of agony. Captives placed within were subjected to a cycle of sensory overload, every nerve ending electrified, every bone ground to dust, only to be reformed and broken again. The pain was not just physical, it was spiritual. The soul cage did not just destroy the body, it devoured the soul, feasting on screams, thriving on suffering, turning torment into sustenance. Among the Night Lords, another horror was born, the Parasite Helm. A relic of Nostramo, it was a crown of barbed spikes and leering skulls, a device that fused with the wearer's skull, embedding itself in the brainstem. The Parasite Helm was not content to merely inflict pain. It fed on fear, amplifying the darkest nightmares of its victim and projecting them outward. Those who wore the helm became walking spectres of dread, their minds a fractured kaleidoscope of terror, their bodies puppets to the helm's unholy influence. And then there were the soul grinder circuits, the dark mechanicum's attempt to refine the butcher's nails into a device of pure, unfiltered suffering. The circuits were implanted not into the brain, but into the spinal cord, lacing the entire nervous system with wires and electrodes. Each pulse of electricity was a hammer blow against the soul, each spark a surge of agony that shattered the mind into fragments. Those implanted with the circuits became little more than machines of pain, their bodies convulsing in endless spasms, their screams a chorus of torment that echoed through the manufactorums like a hymn to the dark gods. But perhaps the most insidious device was the Oculus Maledictum, a black, glassy orb said to be a fragment of a shattered warp gate. The Oculus was a window into madness, a portal through which the darkest entities of the warp could peer, whisper, and invade. Those who gazed into its depths saw their worst fears made manifest. Visions of hellscapes, echoes of suffering, fragments of lost souls screaming into the void. The Oculus did not just show visions. It devoured minds, consuming the sanity of those who dared to stare too long, leaving them hollow, empty, broken. Each of these devices was a weapon, a tool, a conduit of suffering. But the butcher's nails were different. They did not merely inflict pain, they transformed it, reshaped it, refined it. They turned agony into rage, suffering into power, despair into fury. They did not just destroy minds, They corrupted them, twisted them, rewired them, until there was nothing left but the nail's relentless, ceaseless pulse. For Angron, the butcher's nails were not just a curse, they were a mirror, a reflection of his own broken soul, a monument to the suffering he could not escape. And for the World Eaters, they were a death sentence. The Dark Mechanicum had created other horrors, other devices of unimaginable cruelty. But the butcher's nails remained their crowning achievement, their ultimate act of engineered evil, a device that tore away everything that made a man human and replaced it with nothing but rage. The butcher's nails were not meant to spread. They were a curse, a disease, a plague of engineered agony confined to the World Eaters alone. But in the warp-twisted hellscape of the Horus heresy, nothing stayed contained for long. The nails, like a virus, began to spread beyond Angron's legion, infecting minds, corrupting bodies, turning warriors into berserkers, driven mad by the relentless, ceaseless pulse of suffering. Khorne, the blood god, saw the potential. The nails were a tool of absolute rage, a device that transformed fear into fury, pain into power, suffering into slaughter. And in the dark depths of the Eye of Terror, Khorne's demons began to forge their own variations of the nails, each one more insidious, more brutal, more catastrophic than the last. The World Eaters were the first to fall. Those who had resisted the implantation at first now clamoured for it, driven to desperation by Angron's unrelenting demand for blood. The nails became a rite of passage, a mark of loyalty, a seal of damnation. Those who refused were beaten, tortured, maimed, until they begged for the nails to end the suffering. And when they finally received the implants, they became animals, thrashing, howling beasts with no thought but to kill, no desire but to bleed. But the contagion did not stop there. The Black Legion, under the command of Abaddon the Despoiler, saw the butcher's nails as a weapon, a means of breaking the minds of even the most disciplined warriors, reducing them to bloodthirsty monsters who would charge into battle without fear, without reason, without restraint. The Black Legion's warpsmiths began to experiment, crafting their own versions of the nails, lacing them with demonic circuitry, fusing them with warp-forged metals that sang with the whispers of the dark gods. Some legions resisted. The Night Lords, masters of terror, saw the nails as a threat to their psychological warfare, a device that would reduce their warriors to mindless beasts. The Iron Warriors, stoic and unyielding, viewed the nails as a weakness, a crutch that robbed a man of his mind and turned him into a rabid dog. But even among these legions, there were those who succumbed, those who sought the nails as a means of escaping fear, of numbing pain, of erasing the memories of what they had become. Even beyond the traitor legions, whispers of the nails began to spread. Rogue Mechanicum enclaves, fallen Imperial worlds, chaos cults, all sought to replicate the device that had transformed the World Eaters into a legion of blood-soaked killers. The nails became a symbol of power, a mark of allegiance to Khorne, a badge of honor among those who had embraced the Blood God's creed. In the Eye of Terror, the butcher's nails were not just a device, they were a sacrament, a ritual, a rite of passage. Those who bore the nails were marked as the Blood God's chosen, the favored sons of Khorne, the berserkers of the Skull Throne. They wore the nails like a crown, like a halo, like a curse, and with every beat of the nail's electric pulse, they heard the voice of Khorne, screaming for blood, demanding slaughter, commanding them to kill, to maim, to burn. And in the depths of the eye, the dark forges of the warpsmiths continued to hum, their furnaces blazing, their anvils ringing, their hammers striking. The butcher's nails were not done. They were spreading, multiplying, infecting minds, corrupting souls, dragging the galaxy deeper and deeper into madness. Angron's fall was not a sudden, explosive collapse. It was a slow, grinding descent, a journey into darkness that began the moment the butcher's nails sank their fangs into his skull. He was not born a monster. He was made into one agonizing moment at a time. And as the nails dug deeper, as the pain mounted, as the rage consumed him, Angron was dragged down, inch by inch, into a chasm of unending torment. The nails did not just inflict pain, They rewired Angron's mind, converting suffering into rage, anguish into fury. Every memory of Nuceria, every face he had failed to save, every scream he could still hear, all of it became fuel for the nail's electric pulse. The pain was constant, unyielding, a storm that never ended. And beneath that storm, Angron could feel himself slipping away, his identity dissolving into a haze of blood and fury. For Angron, there was no peace. Not in sleep, not in battle, not even in the moments between. The nails never stopped. They never quieted. They never let him forget. The past became a black hole, an endless abyss that swallowed him whole, dragging him deeper into the blood-soaked memories of Nuceria. And the deeper he sank, the more the rage consumed him. But Angron was not just a victim, he was a weapon, a living, breathing engine of violence, a tool of unrelenting wrath. The World Eaters saw him as a god, a demigod, a symbol of Khorne's fury. But to Angron, they were nothing but echoes, phantoms, shadows, ghosts. His sons had become mirror images of him, broken, screaming, writhing beneath the nail's electric touch. They called him father, but he did not recognize them. In the end, Angron's transformation was complete. He was no longer a Primarch. He was no longer a man. He was a beast, a monster, a creature of rage and blood. He became the Red Angel, the favored son of Khorne, the blood god's avatar of wrath. The butcher's nails had not just broken Angron, they had obliterated him, erasing every fragment of who he had once been and replacing it with a storm of unrelenting fury. When Angron ascended to demonhood, it was not a blessing, it was a curse. The pain did not end. The agony did not fade. The nails continued to pulse, continued to scream, continued to devour what little remained of Angron's soul. He was immortal now, but immortality did not bring peace. It brought only more suffering, more rage, more blood. For Angron, the price of power was everything. His mind, his soul, his humanity, all of it had been burned away, consumed by the nail's relentless pulse. The Red Angel was all that remained, a creature of pure rage, a monster of blood and bone, a god of unending fury. And in the depths of his tortured mind, Angron could still hear the echoes of Nuceria, the screams of the slaves, the cries of the dying, the voices of those he had failed to save. But they were only echoes now, and Angron could not remember why they mattered. The butcher's nails were not confined to the past. Their echoes still resound in the present, a haunting, electric pulse that reverberates through the galaxy. The 41st Millennium is a dark and blood-soaked age, and the legacy of the nails continues to infect minds, corrupt bodies, and drive men to madness. The World Eaters did not die with Angron's transformation. They spread like a wildfire across the galaxy, a legion of berserkers driven by the nail's relentless scream. For them, the battlefield is a cathedral of carnage, a sanctuary of slaughter, a place where the nail's agony can be momentarily quieted by the sound of bones breaking, blood spilling, enemies screaming. Kharn the Betrayer remains the most infamous of these warriors, a walking monument to the butcher's nail's unrelenting fury. Once a voice of reason, once a man who tried to hold the Legion together, Kharn is now a vessel of pure rage, a creature who lives only to kill. The nails sing to him, a ceaseless chorus of torment and hatred, and Kharn obeys their command without question. Wherever he walks, blood flows, bodies fall, and the nails scream their electric hymn. But the nail's influence has spread far beyond the World Eaters. Across the Eye of Terror, warpsmiths and chaos sorcerers have begun to experiment with new variations of the nails, devices that inflict not just pain, but terror, despair, madness. Some are implanted with circuits that connect them directly to the warp, allowing demons to invade their minds, possessing them, devouring them, transforming them into living engines of suffering. Even among the Imperium, rumors persist of rogue tech priests attempting to recreate the nails, seeking to harness their power without succumbing to their curse. But the nails are not a tool, they are a trap. Those who implant them soon find themselves spiraling into madness, the pain devouring their minds, the rage consuming their souls, until all that remains is blood and fury, and the endless, ceaseless scream of the nails. For the World Eaters, there is no end, no escape, no redemption. The Butcher's nails have become their god, their master, their reason for being. They fight not for glory, not for conquest, not for corn, but to silence the screaming in their skulls. And in the depths of the Eye of Terror, Angron watches, his eyes ablaze with fury, his mind still echoing with the screams of Nuceria, the screams of his legion, the screams of those who could not escape the curse of the Butcher's nails. The galaxy bleeds, the battlefield burns, and the Butcher's nails continue to pulse, their electric scream a hymn of torment, a song of suffering, a requiem for all that was lost. The World Eaters march, their minds shattered, their bodies broken, their souls consumed by the nails' unending hunger. For them, the war never ends. The nails will not let it. The Butcher's nails were not a weapon. They were a sentence, a curse of eternal suffering, a device of engineered agony that transformed men into monsters, warriors into berserkers, primarchs into demons. The galaxy was forever changed by their invention, and the echoes of their relentless pulse still reverberate across the void, a haunting refrain of blood and rage. For Angron, the Butcher's nails were a monument to everything he had lost. He had been a child, a slave, a warrior, a brother, and the nails had taken all of it. They had burned away his mind, hollowed out his soul, filled the void with fire and fury and endless, unrelenting pain. The Red Angel was all that remained, a creature of rage and slaughter, a beast whose every heartbeat was a scream of torment. For the World Eaters, the nails were a legacy of suffering, a curse they could not escape, a chain they could not break. They marched through the galaxy as broken men, their minds consumed by the nails' electric symphony, their bodies driven to the brink of collapse by the relentless, ceaseless agony. They were not soldiers. They were engines of war, berserkers bound to corn by the nails' unholy pulse. The Dark Mechanicum still forges new horrors in the depths of the Eye of Terror, new devices of torment, new instruments of pain. The Soul Grinder circuits, the Parasite Helms, the Oculus Maledictum, each a monument to suffering, each a reflection of the nails' evil, each a scream in the dark that will never be silenced. But the Butcher's nails remain the most infamous, the most feared, the most devastating. They were the beginning, the first step in a descent that would drag Angron and his legion into the abyss, a descent from which they would never return. The nails were a doorway to damnation, a gateway to oblivion, a device that reduced men to beasts, and beasts to monsters. And in the 41st millennium, that door remains open. The Butcher's nails continue to pulse, their electric scream a hymn to the blood god, a song of suffering that echoes across the galaxy. The World Eaters march, their eyes blank, their minds shattered, their souls devoured by the nails' unrelenting hunger. For them, the war never ends, the pain never stops, the rage never dies, the nails will not let it.